just want to say three things. I think that the discussion was very interesting and shows the potential to move forward from here. The first thing is to say, I don't know the name of the woman from SIPTU, but I totally agree with you. When I talk about social movements, of course, labour and the trade union movement are absolutely central to that. So I want to make that absolutely explicit. There is no possibility of any alternative future in Ireland unless they are absolutely central. And that's a message to both sides, if there's a divide here, to the community and voluntary sector side and to the trade union side. And I think there have been resistances on both sides of that. But building a movement, of course, must have labour both as a social movement and labour as a political party and a political movement. And I respond to what Róisín was saying there, central to that. And the other dimension that's absolutely central to that today is the Greens. And again, there's a tendency to sort of think of the Green agenda as something apart. And I have come across some criticisms among people from a more egalitarian point of view, very critical of the Green agenda. The Green agenda is absolutely central to the future, and that those alliances must build in the environmental NGOs as key partners in this. And there's much, I think, to be learned on various sides of this debate from all of them. The second dimension that I want to refer to is, I don't know who was it said, to talk to the idea of about a national human rights action plan. I think this is a very interesting idea. I myself have mentioned in the past in writings the idea of doing an annual human development report for Ireland. Many countries in the world now do a human development report. In other words, a detailed, academically well-grounded report that gives a broad overview of where we are. Now, you might say, well, NESC do that every 3 years. But it seems to me that's exactly what needs to be criticised, because that's not the way to go about it. What we need is a report that tells it warts and all, and that has a coherence to it. And I think on neither of those doesn't NESC come up to the mark. And that must reflect the sorts of things that Mary was talking about, the profound deficiencies in this society that our elites, political and economic, it seems to me, are often very blind to. It must mirror really what's happening. And it must therefore, I mean, part of the value of that is that it brings together what often can be a set of fragmented issues into a holistic view of what's happening in Irish society, the real challenges. I could talk in more detail about the wonderful report that's put out in Costa Rica every year, the Estado de la Nación. And I spoke, the last time I was in Costa Rica less than a year ago with the director of the office, and he was telling me how different their methodology is to the methodology that NESC uses. I was telling him about NESC, and he had in fact visited the website of NESC, so he knew about it. And I think what they present is a far richer and more politically useful document. So that's, I mean, I think that these are mechanisms that we can begin to strategize around as a possibility of moving ourselves forward. I think the issue of taxation when it's raised, and somebody raised this point early on, raises, of course, the fact that you can't talk about a strategy for taxation without talking about a strategy for reforming the state, because it is the reality in Ireland. And many people don't want to pay more taxes because they know that much of the money will be wasted. We won't get better public services. And we need to therefore strategize not just around the taxation dimension of that agenda, but the state reform dimension. And that shows just how ambitious this project must be. And the final point I want to make is to back up Róisín Shortall's point. Ultimately, any serious strategy for reimagining and achieving our imagining of Ireland has to be political. And it seems to me there were spaces opened, we talked about 20 years ago, spaces opened with the potential for new political actors to emerge. And those spaces were very quickly closed as the boom arrived, partly because there wasn't a clear vision around the need to invest centrally our energies into building a political alternative. So if there's any lesson that must be learned from the last 20 years is that this is the crucial part of the agenda that has been missing. And clearly the existing Labour Party are a central dimension of that, drawing in other forces and developing a broader alliance, political alliance, which has the possibility of taking power and supplanting the two big conservative parties, is the only vision that's worth envisioning, it seems to me. If it takes 20 years or 30 years, let it be our vision and let us get there. If we started this 20 or 30 years ago, how closer we would be to it now. But we didn't. And Labour didn't, and I'd be critical of the Labour Party for that, though there always were people in the Labour Party who wanted to go that route. Let us learn the hard lessons and realise we're not going to build an alternative for this society without building a broad-based political alternative, and let that be our main priority. Thanks.